Welcome back everyone. Just want to bring you a quick tip. If you have a car that's misfiring, just kind of hesitates, has a little bit of trouble accelerating, anything like that, it can be very frustrating to try to figure out what the problem is, especially if the car does not have a code. So I'm going to show you one thing you can do to eliminate a couple things from the problem. So the last thing you want to do is just start changing all kind of random sensors, because you know that could cost a lot of money. You don't want to just start changing spark plugs either, because they can be quite expensive. Like nowadays, a lot of cars, including this one, has iridium spark plugs, and I believe they're $8 to $10 a piece. Could be a waste of money if that's not your problem. There was a time where I used to be completely against four-cylinder engines. I thought they were just for wimps or whatever. Nowadays, I love four-cylinder engines. They're better on gas, cost a lot less money, and they're so much easier to work on. I mean, this car, for instance, look on top. You have your spark plugs all on top, easy to get to. Spark plug wires, look how short those spark plug wires are. This is actually an older style ignition system. It's a 2011, but it doesn't have the ignition coils on the plugs. It has just a regular digital ignition over there. A little bit of wires, doesn't really cost a whole lot of money. The plugs cost a little bit, but we're going to talk about our fuel problems today. And here's your fuel rail. You've got fuel injectors, all four of them sitting here. This is the inlet line for your fuel injectors. So what we're going to check today is if you have a misfire, hesitation, anything like that, one of the things you want to eliminate is any fuel issues. And if you have a lack of fuel pressure coming from the fuel pump or issues with the injectors, there's an easy test that you can do on your own, whether or not you have a actual Schrader valve on the fuel rail. Just like the older fuel injection systems, like my daughter's 1998 Ford Explorer, actually has a valve on the fuel rail where you can just hook a gauge to it, easily check fuel pressure. A lot of the newer ones don't have that. This one does not. So all we're going to do is we're going to take this line loose here. I'm going to put a gauge in there, and we're going to check the fuel pressure. Just check, make sure that the fuel filter is not clogged. Make sure that the fuel pump is giving us enough pressure, and then we're going to turn the car off, and we're going to see if the fuel pressure bleeds down too fast. That could mean that we could have clogged injectors. So we're going to eliminate all of those things by putting a fuel gauge here and seeing what's going on. So just a few special tools to accomplish this job. You're going to want some type of inline adapter for your fuel line. You're going to want to link the fuel hose. You're going to want a pressure gauge, and then over to the right, you're going to want something to take the fuel line loose. Now, if you don't have these tools and you're just a DIY mechanic, it doesn't make sense for you to buy all these things, but a lot of these things are readily accessible and you can rent them from the local auto parts for free. So now, if you want to be completely safe, you could take your fuel pump fuse, you can take it out, and once you take the fuel pump fuse out, of course the fuel pump is not going to operate, then you can turn the car over. That will release all the pressure in the line. Then you can take the fuel line loose right here at the fuel rail, what we looked at earlier, and you won't have any fuel sprayed. To have a little bit, but you still want to put a towel underneath. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take this loose just to show you what it would do even if you had pressure in the line with a hot engine. I just drove this car, it's hot. Now don't do this, but it just show you that it may not be as bad as what you might think it would be. Now I am taking a chance. It could spray fuel everywhere, could start a fire, so be careful. So you're going to want to protect your hands. $15 for a box of 100 at Harbor Freight. Get something to soak up any fuel that may splash around, spray out. Now I've never taken this fuel line off on this particular vehicle with it full of pressure, so I don't know. We're both going to find out what it's going to do. You have this tool, goes up inside, it releases these paws inside of this line here. So you push it up, and what I found is if you push up on the tool and kind of push down on the line at the same time, then bring them both out together, it comes off easier. Put it in, push the line down, push the tool up, and then out together, just like that. Just a little bit of fuel spray, no big deal. Whoa! Except when I took it off, it did spray quite a bit back there. That's what you want to be careful for. As the Grinch would say, that's what these tests are for. Now, of course, that's a pretty dangerous situation. We got fumes all around here, and got a hot engine that sprayed back down the exhaust. So that's why you don't do that. So it's too easy to go in here at the fuse box. You want to pull that fuse for the fuel pump, turn the car over a few times, make sure all that fuel pressure is gone. You won't have all that gas dumped in. So now We're gonna pull out the towel. We're gonna pray it don't catch on fire. Then we're gonna take our inline fuel line. This end here goes on the fuel rail. This side goes back to the fuel pump. Hear it click in place. Our length of fuel hose goes onto this end. We have a clear drain line for when we're done. We can release the pressure with this button. And our fuel gauge goes on, clicks in place. Now what you can do is just turn the key on, turn it back off. That should pressurize the system. We can check for leaks. Don't see any leaks so far, but we don't have very much pressure. We'll go ahead and hit the key a few more times, see if we can get it pressurized. So now after pressurizing everything, we see we have no leaks. No leaks at the fuel rail, no leaks at the inlet line from the fuel pump, no leaks coming from the area where our fuel hose connects, where our gauge connects. Everything looks good, no fuel leaks. It's time to crank the car. One thing that you want to do, you want to look up your vehicle and see exactly what your fuel pressure should be. Now this particular vehicle, the minimum fuel pressure is 55 psi. Like anything else in the world, we're not necessarily looking for perfection, but if you have less than 55 psi while the car is running, then that could be one of your problems, especially on acceleration. If it feels like your car dies or noses over, what they call it. If you have less than 55 psi, then you could have a clogged fuel filter or a fuel pump that's not putting out the pressure like it should. It might need to be changed. So now we're going to crank the car up. We're going to see what the fuel pressure is while it's running. So now if you remember, our minimum PSI for this car is 55 and we're running just below 60 PSI, so we have plenty of pressure. But what you also want to do is you want to push the gas a little bit, you want to give a little bit of RPM. You want to make sure that the PSI does not go down while the engine is asking for more gasoline, more fuel, and see if the fuel pump can keep up. Now that we know the fuel pump is keeping up with pressure, we don't have a fuel filter problem, we don't have a fuel pump problem. So now we're going to check the injectors. And one way you can do that on this is you turn the car off. Once you turn the car off, there should be an immediate loss in fuel pressure. That's just the fact of the fuel pump turning off, check valves closing, injectors closing. Or what should happen is the injectors should close as soon as the ignition is off. Once it closes, the fuel line should hold pressure, and then we're going to watch and see if there's a pressure drop. So now what we've had is an instant pressure drop, which is normal. So now we're about 52 psi, and then we're going to sit, we're going to wait for about 10 minutes. So now after the car has sat about 10 minutes, you see we've lost about 2 psi, which I would say really is not that bad. Not a perfect situation, but you never know. That could be due to the gas cooling down. Could be a number of little things, a check valve that goes all the way back to the gas tank. But what you're looking for is you're wanting a fast, steady loss of PSI all the way down to zero pretty quick. And what that means is that's an injector that's stuck open. The injector could be broken, or the injector could be so clogged that it can't close all the way, which you know is not operating correctly. But what this does not check for spray pattern. So since we didn't check for spray pattern, you can't do that unless the injector is actually taken out of the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and clean the fuel injectors anyway, and we're going to do that with a canister fuel injector cleaner like this. And all you do is you fill it full of fluid cleaning solution, you connect it to the car just like we did with the fuel line, or just like we did with the fuel gauge, but you do not connect the fuel line to the system. So when you start the car, it's running solely on this. Air pressure comes in, turn on the fuel regulator, make sure you have a little bit less than the normal PSI, so all the fluid goes into the injectors and not back to the gas tank. Run it through, clean the injectors, help the spray pattern, and eliminate that. But what we've done today is we have eliminated the fuel pump, filter, and all that that's back there in the gas tank. Now this particular car, the fuel module costs a lot of money if you replace all that all at one time. You may think, well, if it's just a fuel pump, why would you want to replace the whole fuel module? Well, some vehicles you can't get just a pump. You have to get the entire module. But one of the things I look at is how many times you want to take the gas tank out. So best thing to do is when you take the gas tank out, or especially if you're paying a mechanic to take the gas tank out, go ahead and replace the entire fuel module with an OEM part. Doesn't necessarily have to be from the dealership, but you can buy an OEM part. Don't buy a Chinese one, buy it from your original equipment manufacturer, put it in there, put it back in. If it's done correctly, then you know that possibly it could last the whole rest of the lifetime of the car. You know it's good. But what we've done is we have eliminated that from this car, as that's not the issue if you had a hesitation issue. So now removing the tool is simple. Of course, we want to bleed the pressure out, and that's what we do with this button. So you take this drain hose here and you make sure that the other end is in the approved gasoline handling receptacle. Then you simply push the button. And as you see, it lets out all the pressure. Use our towel again. This time we won't have the fuel spray that we had last time. Tool works the same on our fuel valve. Push the line, push the tool, then try to push them both out together, just like so. You take your fuel pressure gauge off. This particular tool has a little bit of a different connector down here at the bottom. Push it out of the way, and you can pull it right off. Connect your old fuel line back on, and that's done. Now you want to turn the key on, check for fuel leaks. And as you can see, we have no fuel leaks, car's good to go. And just like that, you can check things yourself and eliminate a couple of fuel issues that may be causing hesitation, and then you can try something else. Now this car does have a little bit of leak down on the fuel injectors, so we're gonna clean those. That's gonna be a whole nother video. Go to the auto parts store, rent you a fuel pressure gauge. They may have a whole kit to be able to do the whole thing. It may have a bunch of adapters in it for normal cars like this Ford. But the best thing is you can keep your money in your pocket by doing it yourself, but make sure you do it safe. Don't do it the way I do it. Have a great day.